Okay, I'll call this regular meeting of council to order, and I'll ask if everybody can please rise for the national anthem. Okay, I'll now ask if there are any disclosures of pecuniary interest and the general nature thereof. Okay, seeing none, I just want to quickly thank staff for putting this together. I know it took a fair amount of work, and everything is organized so well, and the setup is just like back home across the parking lot. So I just want to thank them for putting this together tonight here. Okay, so we will move into delegations. We have 2 delegations this evening. So the first one is Mr. Andrew Watts, and he's here presenting regarding the Lakewood development. So as the setup mimics over there, I think you know what to do.
I'm assuming it's going to work. Good evening, Mayor April and Council, and thank you for listening to me. And good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I apologise for turning my back to you, but I can't do anything else, I'm afraid. I just want to talk for a few minutes about the proposed Lakewood development tonight. The first couple of 3 slides are just to give you some idea of what overdevelopment just might do if it's allowed to happen. That's Binbrook, that's Lakeshore, that's Wainfleet and Binbrook, and there's lots of little subdivisions there and still some green places in Wainfleet. Right, planning and policies, what do they mean for Wainfleet? But first, a simple question, and just think about it. Up until 7 years ago, 2010, there was nothing in provincial or regional planning policy or in Wainfleet's Township's own official plan or zoning bylaw that should have allowed planners or any elected council to accept an application or to approve it from any developer for any proposed condominium development such as Lakewood. So the question you should ask yourselves before you go any further is, why would any developer, also required to be aware of the township's planning policies, and even 6 years earlier, choose to pay $2 million for land that he knew could not be developed? Ponder that whilst we look. Wainfleet's vision statement from the new official plan. Wainfleet's future will build on its rural character and its peaceful, safe and quiet environment through limited and managed growth of its existing hamlets and the lakeshore area. A strong sense of community fostered among neighbours. Only limited development is supported, provided it is planned to fit with and be consistent with the character of the community. Some new housing and services are contemplated to provide the needs of its residents, with an emphasis on services for an ageing population. Its diverse natural heritage system, wildlife, beaches and shoreline will be respected, protected and enhanced. Growth will be based on prudent infrastructure planning and management and strong policies that will define where limited growth will occur and preserve the natural environment. No single mention of either proposed subdivision or condominium-style development. Note, the emphasis is always on limited development. The proposed Lakewood condo is the largest single development ever to be proposed for the township. It is far from limited development. Slide 7, this is the above population and employment forecast first appeared as part of the original Regional Municipal Servicing Plan, Big Pipe for Wainfleet's Lake Erie shoreline properties, which was initiated in 2000. So this goes back a long way, this proposed development we're talking about. They have reappeared in other regional-inspired planning documents since then. Most recently for Wainfleet, they were included as part of the new official plan. They are the figures on which regional planners base their projections for growing development in the region. They are bogus and fictitious and reflect no more than the planner's development-based wish list and have now no basis on reality, as the figures clearly show. Note, this table now appears in the official plan as deferred, although there is no reason given for why and no admission that the figures were wildly inaccurate. It appears that these figures are still being used to rationalise developments such as the proposed Lakewood condominium. All the available and current evidence from both province and region indicates quite clearly that the expected growth rate for Wainfleet remains at 0.3%, zero growth, and is likely to for the foreseeable future and up to 2031. Wainfleet's planning policies recognise a maximum of up to 25 potential new single detached residences per year. That's what they've done for the last 10, 15, 20, 30 years. The planning policies also call on planners and council to ensure affordable housing in the mix. In 2016, I think there were a total of 13 to 16 actual 60 single detached residences completed for the year. In 2017, so far, the figures from the planning department indicate a possible 16 new single detached residences for this year. There is no current credible evidence from the province or region to suggest that Wainfleet requires the addition of 18 subdivision and 41 condo for a total of 59 luxury-priced single detached residences now or in any foreseeable future. In fact, should this council approve the Lakewood condo, it will almost certainly ensure that there will be no affordable housing available in any foreseeable future for present Wainfleet residents who may be looking to buy a first family home in the community they grew up in. This speaks for itself. It makes a complete mockery of the idea of a zoning bylaw and minimum lot size, and also confirms that as far as planners are concerned, there are rules for any Wainfleet resident looking to build a home in his or her own community, whilst there are only rules to be broken for the developers. This is a response to an email, one of the few email responses I got in response to from our planner. In response to your email below, the draft plan of condominium and zoning bylaw amendment were presented at the public meeting held on March the 8th, 2017, and have not been approved or denied by Council. Council will make a decision on the application at future meetings. There were no submissions of an application for draft plan of condominium prior to November 2014. Official plan amendment was approved by Council. The zoning bylaw amendment was approved by Council on September the 11th, 2007, which was appealed by Jeffrey and Lisette Bott. Official plan amendment number 18 was approved by Council on June 25th, 2009, which was appealed by the Wainfleet Water and Sewer Committee, Inc. Both matters were resolved at the OMB in a decision dated March the 11th, 2010. Nobody's approved this application yet. You guys are the ones who are going to have to do it or reject it, and it will be you will own it. Yet for the past nearly 7 years, the developer, the region, the NPCA and planners have chosen to ignore this council and failed to advise them of all the work being done to enable this one specific development to profit this one specific developer. In fact, past township planners have never given these past two councils the option of considering this application and whether to approve or reject it. I hate public speaking. Okay, the next three slides, 13, 14, 15. I call the next three slides the double whammy developer planner sleight of hand trick. That was the original MNR Fowler's toad habitat boundary. It was the evidence produced at the OMB. That was the... Sorry about that, that was a finger problem. I have got more than finger problem, it's just failed on me. I think your tech stuff is falling apart, Council. I wonder if I don't think it's going to work. The light's not on. Oh, thank you. That's the first site plan, and it shows that most of the condos close to the shoreline were entirely in the Fowler toad boundary. I'm sorry about this. Oh, it is going. That is the new site plan. And it's gone over one, and it's gone over another. I apologize for this. I don't know what's happening.
Amber, do you think if Andrew told you next slide, would that work?
Okay, we're working. We're back on again. I don't know what happened. Could you put it back in slideshow, please, Amber? Thank you. The original MNR map showing the Fowler toad habitat after many years of study. The first site plan showing that boundary superimposed, which covers the entire, at least the entire seaside condo development proposed. This is the new site plan. Surprise, surprise, it's all different now. Somehow, the difference between the pale grey and the dark grey, that is the boundary of not only the Fowler toad boundary habitat, but also the extent of development boundary, and believe it or not, also where the sand and shrub line go all the way along the shoreline. And yet the study that the MNR is supposed to have produced to allow this site plan to be put in, I don't believe has ever been released to council or anybody. I certainly haven't been able to find any record of it. I'm a scuba diver instructor, or used to be. I used to work on Caribbean islands. I love the idea of living on a beach, looking out over the sea and walking down in the morning and having my breakfast on the beach, a little paddle, whatever you like. And I saw that design, and I thought that is really nice. That is a beachside condo, and I love the idea of it. I would love to move to somewhere like that tomorrow. This is what's proposed. Those are just 14 of the 12, of the 34 proposed to be put side by side all the way along that site. There's not going to be enough space between them to do any of this beautiful shrubbery and stuff they're talking about. That's what it's going to be. And the bottom end of their properties, which is actually on the hazard land on the sand, of course, these good people are going to be told they're not allowed to use. That is Wainfleet from 10,000 feet. And that is the area targeted by an awful lot of developers, because there's lots of land there and they can put 10,000 houses on there if they really put their mind to it. That's Binbrook at 10,000 feet, and see what they've done there. Those are just Wainfleet Township and Binbrook Township, the little hamlets, and you can see the subdivisions immediately around the centre of Binbrook, and we don't have them quite yet. And that is the slide I started off with. And now, actually, we have one more. If you're a Wainfleet resident and you moved here to live in a nice, peaceful, rural area, I would advise you to read this and read it well. These are the new regional growth forecast figures that the developers, consultants, and your planners are basing their arguments on. Based on similar regional figures for 2001 to 2016, they have no basis on any recorded facts and so no credibility. If you are aware of them, then, and this is to you, Council, if you're aware of these figures that are being put out by the consultants, then you owe it to all of us to let us know when you decided to approve these new regions plans for your township, because we are talking about 11,000 new households. And if you aren't, then I think you have some very real questions for your planning staff and how you have allowed them to administer this file over the past several years. You are still Wainfleet's planning authority, and you are still the only ones ultimately responsible for Wainfleet's future, and you are still the only ones who can stop this happening. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you for that presentation, Andrew. Does any council members have any questions for Andrew? Alderman Conk.
Through you, Madam Mayor. Andrew, can you give us an idea from the public open house that we had in March, how many emails that you have sent council?
Around 72.
Okay, and in that 72 emails, how many questions did you ask?
I would say approximately about 400, somewhere around there.
Have all of those questions been answered at any point in time by staff?
The only questions that have ever been answered directly were by Councillor Hessel and Councillor Gilmore, who did write to me, respond to me and tell me that the increased tax base that part of their decisions were going to be based on was a benefit for Wainfleet. Unfortunately, neither of them followed it with any factual evidence to prove that that would be so. And I think if I had bothered to respond to them, I would have said, would they like to ask the 995 residents of Binbrook Village in 2001 if they've seen their property taxes go down since then?
Okay, so if I could continue. So I'm going to direct this question to our treasurer, Adam. Mr. Watts just mentioned our tax base and the potential increase in our tax base with this condo proposal. Can you give us an idea what kind of property taxes we could expect from this development?
Can I just, I think what we were hoping to do was to have the two delegations and then save the questions for the staff report. So, I mean, we can have Adam answer this one, but then if it's any questions directed to staff, if we can save those for when we get that report on the floor. So if you can answer that, Adam, if not, you can wait until, if you need some time to get that information, or go ahead.
Through you, Madam Mayor, to Alderman Kong. So I think the thing to first remember when it comes to property taxes is there's two components, right? There's the assessment value that MPAC determines, and then there's our tax rate. So in terms of speculating, like, I can't provide what the property values are going to be for these 41 units because I don't know that, and that's not determined by us as a municipality. That's determined by this provincial authority that assesses all values across Ontario. What I can speak to is the fact that they would be classified in our residential tax bracket and would be taxed according to our residential rate, if that makes sense.
No further questions for Andrew? Okay. Does anybody else have any questions for Andrew? Okay, seeing none, thank you so much, Andrew.
You're welcome. Thank you, ma'am.
And now we have Cheryl. Oh, sorry, I need a mover and a seconder to receive Mr. Watt's report. So moved by Alderman Hessel, seconded by Alderman Gilmore. All those in favor? And that's carried. So now we will move to Cheryl Seelig regarding the Lakewood Recommendation Report, PSR 008-2017.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight to the report written by staff with regard to the Lakewood Beach application. I just wanted to speak to Council based on the questions and comments we heard at the public meeting, and to summarize how the zoning bylaw amendment and the draft plan conditions have addressed some of those issues, particularly the zoning how the condominium corporation works and ensuring that the township is protected, which is something that I heard from council quite a bit in March at the public meeting. First, though, I'd like to say that we have reviewed staff's report and that we concur with the recommendations and the draft plan conditions that have been put forward. The proposed 41-unit lakefront development represents good land use planning as it provides for limited, orderly development on sustainable services. The 41 units have been approved first in 2010 for 35 units and then in 2014 for an additional 6 units. So the applications that I'm speaking to in this report aren't to permit the 41 units, it's to determine how those 41 units get built on that property. So I just want to speak to some of the more detailed zoning regulations that have been proposed. In this case, we're proposing smaller lot sizes than the agricultural zone or the rural residential leisure lakeshore zone permits. And the reason for this is because we will be providing communal services. And so the reason for large lot sizes in the residential zones in the area is that usually you have to provide for septic and water on each individual lot. And in this case, we will be providing a communal system, so it allows the unit sizes to be smaller. So the requested zoning bylaw amendment and draft plan of condominium will allow for the properly regulated development of this property. The zoning amendment sets out the standards for the development of each individual dwelling, whereas the existing zoning that was approved in 2010 talks about the larger lot. So it talks about the overall lot size and the overall lot coverage, but that wasn't enough detail to regulate the actual building of each dwelling. And that zoning couldn't be put in place until the EA process had happened. And so that's why we're here before you tonight with specific zoning regulations so that we understand what's going to happen for each dwelling that gets built. So what you'll see in the proposed zoning bylaw, for example, is a lot coverage of 30% for the lots fronting onto the lakeshore and 45% for the lots that do not face onto the lakeshore. The original zoning bylaw talked about a 15% lot coverage for the entire property. And based on the lot coverages that we're proposing per unit, even if we build out each of those 41 lots at that lot coverage, we would still be under 12% overall lot coverage for the whole property. So that's just an important distinction to make in case you were wondering about those differences in the numbers. The original zoning approved in 2010 also talked about 1.5 parking spaces per unit. We've simply left that in place, but given the lot depths, you could anticipate that there will be a minimum of 2 parking spots on each unit. And then as well, block 49 is proposed for visitor parking as well. So a condominium corporation, I know it's something that not everybody's dealt with, but it's a form of land ownership. And in this case, a condominium corporation will be formed. And that means that each unit owner has a responsibility to pay to maintain the shared services. Whereas in a draft plan of subdivision, your road would be assumed by the township and maintenance of the road would be the township's responsibility. With a condominium corporation, the responsibility for maintenance and ongoing upkeep of the road, the communal systems, the shared amenity areas, all of that is the responsibility of the condominium corporation. So it's actually a great tool and mechanism for ensuring that the costs of this development are not pushed back onto the township. And this is all regulated under the Condominium Act. So essentially each owner becomes a member of that corporation and an owner of that piece of that corporation, and they're responsible for maintaining it. And the Act sets out standards in terms of how much everybody has to contribute, what kind of reserves have to be kept, and a process for making sure that everyone is contributing as required. So in this case where we're talking about communal services, a condominium corporation gives the township another layer of protection in terms of ensuring that the services are maintained appropriately. The draft plan of condominium approval contains 60 conditions that we have to fulfill, which will help to ensure that the township is protected and that the development as proposed moves forward, meeting all of the technical requirements by all of the agencies, such as standards for servicing, including firefighting, stormwater management, flood protection, water supply. Once these conditions are fulfilled, we'll enter into a development agreement that gets registered on title so that that continuously runs with the property and that responsibility continues to carry over into the future. So that's why, again, a condominium makes sense for this particular development. Numerous reports have been prepared in support of this application over the years, starting in 2007 all the way through until this year. And the development of these reports has addressed all of the technical issues. All of these reports have been reviewed by agencies such as the MPCA and the region, the township, the MOECC, and at this point all of them have responded and said that they have no further concerns with the approval of this draft plan, subject to the draft plan conditions that are set out to ensure that we address all of the detailed technical criteria for the development of the property. Tonight we have all the consultants here as well who prepared these reports, so if there are further questions with regards to the technical information, we can answer questions. I know one of the issues that came up during the public meeting was the issue of the delineation of the Fowler's toad habitat. And I just would like to reiterate that that delineation happened in 2013 with the MNRF. And the process for that was that the MNRF came on site with our consultant, the environmental consultant. They walked the site and told him where that line is. Once they told him where the line was, that's what we've used to base as our establish our limit of development. So it wasn't an iterative process with the MNRF. They told us, we accepted it, and then we based our development off of that. Finally, the EA process that we've undertaken for since November 2014 was all in support of figuring out the best option for servicing the site, both water and wastewater, how we deal with those two issues. And so we've spent since 2014 working through those issues, and we've satisfied the MOECC that our proposed servicing options are viable and represent good, sustainable servicing for the property. So for these reasons, I think that the protection of the township is achieved through the condominium corporation and also the draft plan conditions that have been set out tonight and recommended by planning staff. There are 5 in particular that I think speak to issues that I heard in March. So one of the issues I heard in March was a concern about the existing abandoned septic beds on the property. Condition 25 speaks to that issue, and it says that prior to issuance of a building permit, the owner shall remove the existing inoperable sub-sewage system in accordance with Section 53 of the Ontario Water Resources Act. So that means that we will deal with that issue at the appropriate time once we deal with our draft plan conditions should this be approved. A second one was the issue of making sure that what we do at our site does not impact Long Beach Water Works. And so condition 26 speaks to that prior to final approval, the owner shall submit the necessary information and/or studies to demonstrate that the Long Beach Water Treatment Plant has sufficient capacity to service the subject lands while still providing adequate service to all existing customers of the Long Beach Water Treatment Plant, to the satisfaction of the Township of Wainfleet and the region of Niagara. Another issue was around the wastewater treatment plant and ensuring that noise and odor impacts would be mitigated and that there wouldn't be any on the adjacent neighbors. So there's a condition in here that says prior to final approval, the owner shall submit the necessary noise and odor studies demonstrating that the proposed wastewater treatment plant will not generate any adverse impacts on surrounding sensitive uses. And sensitive uses are always residential uses. The last 2 that are in particular speak to issues that we heard at the March meeting. So another issue was, again, making sure that the township was covered and not going to be, I guess, left on the hook for costs. So again, I explained that the condominium corporation will be responsible for maintaining the systems. And in addition, the owner must enter into a municipal responsibility agreement with the regional municipality of Niagara to address potential future requirements for the servicing of the site. Meaning that should there ever be an issue with the servicing of the site, the region of Niagara would step in, make sure that all corrective actions were taken, and then that billed back to the condominium corporation. And then finally, the last thing that I want to highlight that we heard in March was the issue of firefighting and fire protection for the property. I understand that there was concern about the dwellings because there are smaller lot sizes and they're closer together. And so one of the conditions that the township is imposing is that we should sprinkler each of the units in order to provide enhanced protection in the event of a fire. And so that's something that we will also address through this approval process. So that's a summary of a lot of the big issues that were raised in March and how we feel we've addressed them going forward. And as I mentioned, there's many other conditions that we will work through should this be approved tonight. But we feel that these conditions that are being imposed are reasonable and will help to ensure the orderly and proper development of this site. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Cheryl. Are there any questions from council members to our presenter? Alderman Hessels?
Yeah, I'm not sure if it should be brought up now or later, but there was an MDS, minimal distance separation, and so that concerns me a little bit. I wouldn't want anything to impede on those people, and I don't know if we could, if you put something like a clause in there, a full disclosure clause, or the other thing is the FFPPA, Food Farming and Food Protection Act, or like if those things could be imposed on the Condominium Act or whatever, so that those people won't run into problems. And actually, it'd be good for it to be in there anyway. Anybody driving through Wainfleet to get to their condos know that they can be susceptible to those 7 nuisances from farming.
Through you, Mrs. Mayor. So there is a condition here that requires that a warning clause be included in the condominium agreement, and it states that the lands in the plan of condominium may be exposed to reduced air quality and/or odor from nearby agricultural operations that may interfere with some activities in the owners, tenants who occupy these lands. So that will be included in all of the condominium agreements, as well as on all agreements of purchase and sale. So right up front, this is something that will be brought to the attention of potential buyers.
Okay, well, that's great. The other thing, you did talk about fire. I'm not sure how wide the road is that you're putting through there, and how do you keep people from parking on the side of the roads? Like, because it should be basically called a fire lane, I think. So I don't know what your remedy for that is.
Through you, Mrs. Mayor. Definitely, there will be a requirement to maintain a minimum width free for a fire lane. So depending on the width of the road, it might be that there's no parking permitted on the road and/or that's only permitted on one side in order to ensure that the proper fire lane is maintained. And I think that's captured in the conditions where we do have to deal with proper fire emergency access to the satisfaction of the fire chief.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for Cheryl? Okay, seeing none, I need a motion. So thank you, Cheryl, for the presentation.
Thank you.
I need a motion to receive the presentation, moved by Alderman Dykstra, seconded by Alderman Gilmore. All those in favor, and that is carried. So now if everybody can hang tight, we're going to go through a few things and then we'll come to the report. So one of these items is my favorite part of the night, my mayor's remarks. So I'll go quickly through them. I got a good audience tonight, at least. So Our Canada 150 celebration was a huge success. I see a lot of faces here that were also in attendance at the event. So I want to thank everyone who made it possible and everybody who attended. Really thank the staff and the volunteers. We had a great volunteer committee, and they did a lot of work, and staff as well really led the charge on that. And we had a lot of great feedback that day and after, and we were told that we had more people than some of the other municipalities. So we were really proud of that. So we want to thank everybody for making that such a great day. And also, Welland Employment Solutions held their grand opening ceremony on July 6th in the Seaway Mall. So I was able to participate at that, and I encourage everybody to go and check it out. They are across from my favorite store, Winners, in the Seaway Mall. So if people want to stop by and see what they're up to, but we wish them all the best in continuing the good work that they do in the community. And on July 7th, I had the privilege of attending the Battle of Hong Kong plaque dedication ceremony in Port Colborne, and so it was a pleasure to be part of that, and it was in memoriam of two gentlemen from Port Colborne who had served in that battle, so it was an honor to be part of it and also a great opportunity for me to learn a lot more about it, so it was a pleasure to attend that. And on July 9th, I was able to participate in the Port Robinson Canada Day Living Flag event, so that was cool. I really didn't think we had enough people to do the picture of the flag, and then when I saw it after, I was so shocked at how well it turned out. So it was really, really good and good to kind of continue those Canada 150 celebrations. And also wanted to mention that Lee Gudgeon and myself have been reaching out to local businesses. We've picked that back up from a couple years ago now when we were visiting local businesses. So to date, we have connected with Heemskirks, and we've been out to Berg's, and then today we were at Minor Brothers. So it's been going well and getting a lot of great feedback from those businesses. The regular board meeting for the Conservation Authority is tomorrow morning at 9:30 at Balls Falls. And the next regional council meeting is this coming Thursday, the 20th, and then that'll be it until September. And then our next council meeting is August 1st. Okay, so with that, I'll hand it over to the clerk for the minutes.
That the minutes of the regular meeting of council held on June 20th, 2017, and the minutes of the special meeting of council held July 5th, 2017 be adopted as circulated.
So I need a mover and a seconder for the minutes. Moved by Alderman Gilmore, seconded by Alderman Dykstra. Were there any errors or omissions or questions with the minutes? Okay, seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor, and that is carried. And now we'll go into our first staff report.
That building staff report BSR 7, 2017, building permit report June 2017, and the recommendations contained therein be adopted as circulated.
Okay, I need a mover and a seconder for that. Moved by Alderman Gilmore, seconded by Alderman Hassels. Any questions or discussion? Alderman Gilmore.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I know Randy's not here tonight, so I'll direct my questions to Adam. I took a call a couple weeks ago from the owners of Newhouse Onions who are expanding their greenhouse, and when they came in to get their building permit and pay their fees, they got a bill for $24,000. Initially, they got a bill for $2,400, and the owner questioned it because the square footage was, they had made a mistake making the calculation. But my point is, when I review this report, the value of their construction is $600,000. There's several single detached dwellings on this list. One is for a value of $550,000, and they paid a fee of $2,431. There's another one for $450,000, which is a single detached dwelling and an attached garage, and their fee was $5,000. So there seems to be some inequity. I realize that they were told it's because of the area that they were developing. Well, that goes without saying. If it's a commercial greenhouse, it's going to take up a large area. But there's a problem here in fairness. If the building department permit department and the building department is operating on cost recovery, then I either would like to see the details of the number of inspections it would take him to inspect the greenhouse where nothing is actually covered, it's all exposed, versus a single detached dwelling which has multiple layers of construction and requires more visits. Or we come up with some rationalization for a reduction to make this matter more commensurate with the amount of time it takes the inspector to do his work. So I really think you need to answer the question at this point, but I would request that since Randy's not here, perhaps for the next meeting or the one after that, we come up with some report explaining one or the other. How we justify that number versus numbers that are 70 to 90% less for similar value construction of single detached dwellings.
Alderman Gilmore, just, so that was strictly for the building permit, that didn't include any kind of studies or any of that kind of stuff that can sometimes accompany these projects?
No, that was just for the building permit. It was because it's 100, he gave me the figures. It's about an acre addition. So it's mainly because it's a commercial permit, and it's because it's a very large footprint. But it's a greenhouse. So there's something askew there that needs to be looked at.
Okay, so we'll make that note. Adam, did you wish to respond, or you'll?
Through you, Madam Mayor, to Alderman Gilmore. Yeah, if that's council's wish to have staff bring back a report, we can certainly do so.
Okay, all right, that's good. Okay, so any further questions on the building report? All right, seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor, and that is carried. And now we'll move on to bylaw.
That bylaw enforcement staff report EESR 5, 2017, monthly statistical report, June 2017, and the recommendations contained therein be adopted as circulated.
Mover and a seconder for this report, moved by Alderman Conk and seconded by Alderman Dykstra. Any questions on this report? Okay, seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor, and that is carried. And now we'll move on to our fire reports.
That fire staff report FSR 6, 2017, fire station RFP update, and the recommendations contained therein be adopted as circulated.
Okay, a mover and a seconder for the report, moved by Alderman Dykstra, seconded by Alderman Conk. So any questions or concerns or comments? Alderman Hassels.
Yeah, so before, you want to change it from an RFP to an RFT is what I understand from the report. So are we going to see this report even before it gets to that point, or before you send it out? Like, I think we were supposed to see a report back to us before it went out for an RFP, but it sounds like you want to bypass that now, but maybe you can explain.
Sure, I'll look to the chief to respond to that question.
Through you, Your Worship, Alderman Hessels, actually this will actually incorporate, by transitioning to this approach, will actually incorporate more input through a review process and actually will assist in accommodating what council's request was originally. So we'll be able to have that as we develop this tender.
I guess, so it's not going to go to tender until we see the report.
That would be correct.
Okay, and I don't know if this, I know you spoke in this report about the protective thing going into the hall. So I'm not sure if that has anything to do with this report, but I don't think that's the right hall to be putting it in. So I don't know if that should, I guess that's why I'd like to see the report before it goes to tender, because those are some questions I think we need to look at. To put a system like that in a hall way on the other side of Wainfleet, other people on the other side, they still have to bag and tag their equipment to bring it there. And you look at the capital cost, the man hours to run it, and a bunch of other things. I think you need to put a special septic system in. I feel like that we would be better looking at just bagging and tagging it and sending it out to another municipality that has the facilities to do that. So I don't know if this was the proper time to address that, because it was in the report.
So Chief, will that, when you bring back the report, will that be something that can be discussed at that time? You'll address it in the report, and then council can have an opportunity to weigh in on that?
Through your worship to all of council, yes, we actually have the opportunity to have some additional input into that during that process, and we will have the flexibility to make adjustments through that.
Alderman Hessel, is all good?
Yeah, if that's
Okay.
the way it works.
Okay. Alderman Conk.
Through you, Madam Mayor, I just want to clarify Alderman Hassel's request with regards to a report. Is that report going to contain detailed design?
Through your worship to Alderman Conk, the tender process actually does contain much more detailed design than an RFP process does. It will actually permit us to have greater control over the process and the components and the design documents that are submitted with the tenders, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any further questions or comments? All right, seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? And that's carried. So now we're on to the second fire report.
That fire staff report FSR 7, 2017, regarding Fire Master Plan Implementation Committee, terms of reference, and the recommendations contained therein be adopted as circulated.
The mover and a seconder, moved by Alderman Dykstra, seconded by Alderman Conk. Any questions or discussion on this report? Alderman Hessel.
Yeah. Usually when you have committees, isn't it the job of the chair to bring it to council? Because here I say it's the fire chief is going to bring all the recommendations to council. But when you have committees, doesn't the chair usually do that? The chair of the committee, like, because...
Through your worship to Alderman Hessel, so generally what happens is the committee will get together and they will put forth recommendations to council. I'm not sure what the Fire Master Plan Committee has process-wise, if the recommendations are coming through the chief. Maybe the chief can speak to their process, but generally it's coming from the committee as a whole to council for council's blessing to move forward with the recommendation.
I'll look to the chief to comment further, but I think part of our discussion today was to have things come in the form of minutes to council. So not necessarily correspondence, not necessarily the chairman bringing it, like you're saying. Like I know at the region, the Transportation Steering Committee and all those subcommittees, they come through the standing committees in the form of minutes, and then people can raise it and say, I don't understand why this happened at the committee, or I don't like this recommendation, or so on and so forth. So the chief can speak further to it, and then I sense you have more questions, so I'll look to the chief.
Through your worship to all of council, the recommendation actually was existing in the previous set of terms of reference that was established for this committee. Obviously, this is a committee of council, and council ultimately will be the ones to accept or establish these terms of reference. The committee has done a review of the previous terms and made some amendments and some adjustments that they're recommending to council. Should council wish to take that in, have a different reporting structure, we can make those amendments as you wish.
Yeah, like I know we've done it with the arena that time and a few other things. The chair always came. It just seemed like it's not staff, and I don't know, it just felt like we're involving these people. They feel the real need to be involved then, so that's why I think it'd be a good idea that the chair come with it.
So Alderman Hessel, you're talking about anytime there's a recommendation, like we're just trying to, I think staff's trying to understand exactly. So for instance, the Recreation Master Plan Committee, we'd have Joan and Ann come and make a recommendation as to moving forward. We want to have, put benches at the beach or bicycle racks.
Yeah, I think when it comes to the public meetings, probably part of it, that So there's going to be stuff that is directly fire chief related, okay, that's his thing, but whatever the committee has, because they're in there for a certain thing, I'd kind of like to see them guys come up with the recommendations, or that they present it.
Okay, I think the chief or Adam, somebody wants to speak to it.
So just for the reference of council, the item that Alderman Hessels is talking about is under committee procedures. I believe it is, sorry, no, it's not. It's under purpose mandate. It's item 2C, which references how the recommendations come. So basically, the intent is that the committee would then come up with a recommendation, and it would be the responsibility of the chief to bring forward that recommendation on behalf of the committee to council.
So Alderman Hessels, you're suggesting amending that to have it be the committee chair?
That, I kind of would like to see that.
Okay. So would the committee chair be available to do that on, or I guess we could have a default that
Well,
the chief could if.
it's not going to be a last moment thing. It'll be an
Okay.
organized event.
Okay, so so Alderman Hessels is going to make that amendment? We don't see. Sure. So your motion then would be to amend this to change it from, all
fire-
recommendations will be provided to council through the committee chair instead of fire chief.
Yeah, anything to do with that fire master implementation.
Yeah.
Or I guess you got a different name for it now.
Yeah, it's under here, under the terms of reference. So it's that first line of 2C. All recommendations will be provided to council through the committee chair. Okay, so is there a seconder? Can I get a seconder for that first? Seconder for that amendment? Alderman Conk, Chief, you wanted to comment?
Yes, sorry, just for clarity and to keep things common, item 11C would also have to be revised, which states, which is proposed that it says that all recommendations provided to council through the chief. Under 11C talks about a consensus. Where consensus cannot be reached by the committee, then all options are presented to council. So that would have to be changed as well.
Okay, so Alderman Hessels, you're obviously okay with that. So Meredith, you've caught that. So we've got a mover and a seconder. So now we've got a question to the amendment. It's fun tonight. Alderman Dykstra.
Through you, Madam Mayor, just to remind Alderman Hessels that there already is a standing council member that sits on the committee, so I don't understand why there would be any difference, because you already have a committee member that is a councillor.
Well, it's just from history. We've always had the chair of the committee come and make the recommendations. You're a council member, their staff, it's just, so that's kind of why I'd like to see them guys do it. They're not part of staff or council.
If I may continue, Madam Mayor, and also being a member of some of the other committees, such as the Drainage Committee, typically we've not had our chair in any other committee come forward. It's always been staff or a staff report backed up by the committee. I know we've had committee members attend the meeting and sit in the galley, but in my opinion,
Okay, any further questions or comments regarding the amendment? Okay, so I'm going to call the question on the amendment. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? Okay, and that is carried. So now we're moving back to the body of the report. Alderman Hessels, did you have any more comments? No? Okay, anybody else have any comments or questions about this report? All right, seeing none, then I will call the question on the report as amended. All those in favor? And that's carried. Okay, so now we are moving on to the planning reports.
The planning staff report, PSR 8, 2017, regarding applications for zoning bylaw amendment and draft plan of condominium, Lakewood Beach Properties Limited, and the recommendations contained therein be adopted as circulated.
Okay, so I need a mover and a seconder for the report. Moved by Alderman Gilmore, seconded by Alderman Dykstra. And then we'll go to questions or comments about the report. Oh, Sarah, did you? Oh, presentation, I apologize. So I'm looking to David for the presentation. Sorry about that.
Okay, thank you, Madam Mayor and members of council. My name is David Riley. I am a consultant with SGL Planning and Design, and the township has retained SGL Planning and Design to work with township staff in this case to review the Lakewood proposal and formulate a staff report. So in this case, it is a joint staff report between planning staff and the consultant, which would be myself and Paul Lowe's here of SGL Planning. So it's quite a lengthy staff report, so we thought it merited a presentation. I will briefly go through everything, and then we'll move on to questions. So if we could move to the next, oh, that's me. I'm doing that. There we go. So the purpose of the report is to consider applications for zoning bylaw amendment, file number Z08-2014, as well as draft plan of condominium, which is file number P01-2014. The location of the subject lands, so the subject of the applications, the lands are located on the screen here, south side of Lakeshore Road. Side Road 18, or the end of Side Road 18, abuts the west side of the site. To the east of the property, we have Bellevue Beach Road, not quite at the eastern boundary. The property spans about 550 meters along the Lake Erie shoreline. The existing official plan designation for the subject lands is the Lakeshore Residential Designation. And you can see along the shoreline, there's also hazard lands and environmental conservation area. There's also a site-specific official plan permission, and what this means is that specific to these lands on this map, highlighted in the red boundary there, I think it's red, I'm colorblind, there is a permission for a maximum of 41 residential units permitted through a plan of condominium on sustainable private services. And there's a condition that says the condominium corporation must be responsible for the operation, maintenance, and costs associated with sustainable private services. So it's important to note here that the official plan, in the official plan as it exists today, the principle of development is already established. So 41 units are permitted on these lands. So the planning report is not focusing on whether it's appropriate for 41 units or not. That is already established, it's a fact. The report is talking about how those units are going to look like and how it's going to be implemented through the plan of condominium and an associated zoning bylaw amendment application, which I will refer to now, or shortly. But before I do that, the existing zoning of the property, so you can see the boundary of the property. A few zones apply here. The main part of the property, which is the larger parcel there, is the RLS zone, which is residential lakeshore. And then there's C15, which means maximum lot coverage 15%. And the -36 means that there's a site-specific provision. And the H means that there's a holding symbol. So the site-specific provision, number 36, specifically on this portion of lands, in that black boundary there where it says RLS C15, there's permitted 35 single detached dwelling condominium units and a series of criteria that apply. These apply to the outer boundary of the site, so it's setbacks from the outer boundary. It's not really controlling what the development would look like on the inside. There's also a holding provision that applies. And a holding provision means that there's certain conditions that must be satisfied prior to any development happening on the property. And many of these conditions, or all of them, have to be met. Part of it is that a site plan or condominium agreement need to be approved for the property. A municipal responsibility agreement, which is an agreement that the applicant's planner had referred to earlier, which is an agreement that would be entered into between the owner of the lands, which would be ultimately the condominium corporation, and the region of Niagara, to ensure that if there's any issues down the road with the servicing, then the region of Niagara would have to step in and address those issues. I won't read through all those requirements, but those are additional study requirements that must be made, and many of them have been done as part of the application to satisfy the proposed development. The draft plan of condominium on the lands, it's a bit difficult to see here, but you can see generally the layout that is proposed. The road is highlighted in that light yellow color. You can see all the condominium units, most of them along the Lake Erie shoreline, some as well on the north side of the private road. And those large blocks at the north, where it says number 42, 50, and 49, are open space blocks. The open space blocks would be primarily used for for that purpose, maintain open space, but also for the purposes of accommodating the communal sewage and sewage system. There's also pathways down to in between the residential units down to access the beach block, which is adjacent to the water. The zoning bylaw amendment application proposes to rezone these lands, and really, you recall before the zoning on the property applies to the whole block, and we've got the open space zone to the south, as well as the portion of the property to the east, which is the O zone. So it's really looking at assigning specific zones and really tightening up the development. The portion that would be residential lakeshore would apply directly to the road as well as the condominium units. Along the lakefront, there would be the open space 3 zone. So this would encompass the entirety of the beach as well as the entirety of the Fowler's toad habitat. And the remaining open space blocks in the north would be open space 6 zone, which would allow only open space uses as well as uses related to the private communal servicing system and any structures related to that. This table represents specific zone regulations that would apply to the residential lakeshore zone, which would be this, where the condominium units would be located, regulating minimum frontage, so that's the width of the lots, how close the house could be from the Fowler's toad habitat, the maximum lot coverage for those lots, etc. And so that's the details of the applications. And I wanted to just touch briefly on the other sections of the report. So the application, as the applicant had mentioned earlier, when they were submitted in 2014, a municipal class environmental assessment process was initiated. And this had to do with the servicing of the property and undergoing a series of studies and public processes to examine how that was going to be done. Essentially, that process is now complete, and the Ministry of Environment and Climate Change has indicated that they're satisfied with the preferred servicing solutions, subject to further approvals that are required at the detailed design stage. So, in other words, when the development, should it be approved, would be constructed, there would be permits that would be required to be issued by the ministry specific to the communal servicing system. So it would have to meet all of their requirements. We've also, as part of reviewing the applications and the reports, it is circulated to many agencies, including the Ministry of Environment and Climate Change, but as well the region of Niagara, the Niagara Peninsula Conservation Authority, Hydro One, as well as the departments within town, so Drainage Department, Operations Department, Fire and Emergency Services, and as well as the Planning Department. So essentially, the comments have come back supportive of the development, subject to conditions of draft approval, which have been included in the staff report. And these conditions must be satisfied prior to the final approval of the plan of condominium, and they include many matters to ensure protections for the town as well as for surrounding properties, to ensure that the property is developed in accordance with the intent that has been proposed. So essentially it's tying the owner of the lands to specific standards. There were also many comments received from the public on the applications, and I wanted to summarize those concerns that were raised both in emails as well as at the public meeting. The report goes into more detail about this, but I'll organize it by theme. The first one is beach access, and there were concerns raised about beach access and that the lands currently are being used for beach purposes or accessing the beach. The lands are privately owned and have always been that way, but one of the conditions that is included in the draft plan conditions would be that the township would recommend or is requiring that the condominium agreement, which would be registered on title on the lands, includes a clause that grants the right for the public to traverse the beach. So that's one way of ensuring that public beach access is maintained. There were also comments raised about the land being used for public purposes rather than a development. Now, these lands are not owned by the township or any public agency, and they're subject to this proposal. And it's important to note that through development applications across Ontario, the Planning Act requires parkland dedication. Parkland dedication is, what that is generally 5% of the lands are required to be dedicated for parkland purposes. Now, a portion of this property has been sold to the NPCA, and back when that occurred, there was a council decision that waived the requirement for this development for parkland dedication on the basis that they provided the NPCA with a large new park. That's why there's no parkland within this block, but with the understanding that a large portion of the property is currently being developed by the NPCA for public purposes. And included in that is going to be a public beach. There were also concerns raised about the Fowler's toad habitat and about the delineation of the line. And I believe the applicant addressed this already, but just to reiterate, is that the Ministry of Natural Resources determined that line very precisely. And there is a permit that the township has a copy of. It's on its public record that delineates that boundary, which determines what the Fowler's toad habitat is. And that line that is on the draft plan reflects exactly that boundary from the permit issued in, or determined in 2013. There were also many comments raised about the character of Wainfleet and that the proposed development doesn't respect the character of the rural agricultural character of the community. And indeed, township staff and us, the consultants, do agree that Wainfleet is primarily an agricultural and rural community. However, it's important to note that the lakeshore area, and this is a lakeshore residential property, is also predominantly characterized by a denser form of development of homes, seasonal and permanent, along the lake. And part of this development is actually implementing that vision, but also retaining a large portion of the lands for open space purposes. So from the Lakeshore Road, the impacted development is lessened, in my opinion, because of those open space blocks that are providing that buffer. Other concerns were raised about the proposed servicing solution. Now, people questioned whether it would be adequate to service, and our comment on that would be the Ministry of Environment and Climate Change, as well as other agencies, have reviewed. We rely on their expertise to review the servicing solutions. This is their job, and they've extensively reviewed all of the studies and have determined that the proposed servicing solution that's preferred can adequately accommodate the development. Now, there were concerns related to that regarding noise and odor caused by the potential wastewater treatment facility as part of the communal servicing system that will be accommodated on this property. And in that regard, township staff and us, we thought that it was important to include a condition that noise and odor be studied and that it be determined that there won't be any impacts on neighboring properties as a result of what's proposed. So that is a condition of approval. Regarding water, there's also a condition that's been included to ensure that the proposed servicing solution is to have water directly from the Long Beach water treatment plant. And there were concerns raised about can the water treatment plant sufficiently accommodate that. The applicant provided data that it could. However, to make sure, a condition is required that the preferred private communal water system can accommodate the development without impacting the residents that are already on the system, and also conditions related to fire and ensuring that there's appropriate storage on site for fire attenuation purposes, considering that sprinklers will be required in these units. So all this will have to be met prior to development. Concerns about traffic and parking were raised. The existing zoning on this property permits 1.5 parking spaces per unit, which is not being changed. However, practically more cars will be able to be parked on this property. And regarding the road access, that was studied in the context of road capacity and can the neighboring intersections in the area accommodate additional traffic caused by this development. Very typical when you're looking at any development application anywhere. And the traffic impact study determined that the roads could accommodate and they're going to continue operating at adequate levels of service. The report was reviewed, including by a peer reviewer, and in the end determined that the report was satisfactory and that no additional improvements were required to the surrounding road network. Light pollution was a very interesting comment and good comment that was brought up by the public. And as such, one of the conditions that is being included in the draft plan conditions would be to ensure that a lighting plan is submitted as part of the final approval, and to ensure that the township is satisfied that light pollution is minimized. So this could be requiring that lights are pointing down, not up, to illuminate the sky. Many measures like that could be taken, but it'll have to be satisfactory to the township before final approval. As well as the issue of contaminated soil on the property. This was another concern that was raised a few times. And particularly as it relates to the sewage system that was already on the property, so that private system there with the Easter Seals camp. The region of Niagara had signed off, so the applicant submitted an environmental site assessment, which is a report that looks at soil contamination. And there's different phases that are required. The region of Niagara has signed off on the phase 1 ESA, saying that they're satisfied that there is no contamination. The study was peer-reviewed by a consultant retained by the township and indicated that that more work was required to satisfy that. The applicant provided more information. The region reviewed the peer review, the additional information, as well as the initial work that was started, and still agree that the phase 1 ESA is satisfactory and that contamination is not an issue on this property. But to that regard, for a condition of approval has been included to require the owner to remove the inoperable sewer system that's already on the property in accordance with the Ontario Resources Act. And this is to make sure that it's done in a proper way and to make sure that there's absolutely no contamination on the property. So that's a summary of broad issues that have been brought up by many people. And well, go back to the recommendation. Now it's not working. Just forward one. Yeah, perfect. So the recommendation, township planning staff and the consultants recommend that the bylaw amendment be approved, maintaining the holding symbol on the lands, which means all those conditions must still be satisfied. One of which is a condominium agreement must be approved, which we're not there yet. Certainly, that's a condition of approval. And also that the draft plan of condominium be approved subject to the conditions of draft plan approval.
Okay, thank you for the presentation. So I'll look to council members if they have any questions for our consultants or for staff. Alderman Hassels?
Yeah. On the open space, is there potential for any further development on open space land? So that'd be all the pink stuff, I guess.
Through you, Madam Mayor, I just thought I would put that screen back up for the discussion, just so we have a visual. There is no potential for development on the lands that are open space. The proposed zoning for the property actually assigns a zoning specific to those properties. It puts them in an open space site-specific zone, which would only allow uses related to the communal sewage servicing system on the property, as well as there's a condition that what's shown on the draft plan, which is Unit 42, be revised to be a common element block 42. So that is owned by the condominium corporation as a whole, rather than retained by the applicant, to ensure that it's a common block for everyone's enjoyment and cannot be built on.
Okay, that answers that question. The septic system, I think in the Condominium Act, we should, even though you're going to clean it all up, what I'd like to see is a full disclosure on there, so in case you don't get anybody down the road, we can say, hey, you've been warned of it. So I'm not sure if this is the time or when we get into the details of the Condominium Act, but that was another thing I thought might be of interest to put on. I think I'm good for now.
Okay, so would that be something that would be added now, or would that be something that, what Alderman Hessels was mentioning, you're saying about?
A full disclosure, any potential hazards that we might think are there now, that you have it in the Condominium Act, so people are well aware of it before they buy that property, that there was this on there, there could be potential for it, so they know what they're buying ahead of it. And
So I'm looking to, I see David flipping through his papers, so we'll give him a second. And while he's doing that, I'm going to look back to Darius to see if he can turn the air down.
Yeah, that's in the services section.
We can, just to satisfy some township manager, but it sounds like they want a reference point.
Yeah, in the condominium agreement.
Yeah, we can add it.
Yeah.
The owners be warned of it.
Yeah. It's okay.
So David, you're ready to respond?
Yes, through you, Madam Mayor, to Councillor Hessels. If you turn to condition 25 of the draft plan conditions. So this condition states, and I'll read it, that prior to the issuance of a building permit, the owner shall remove the existing inoperable sub-sewage system in accordance with Section 53 of the Ontario Water Resources Act and to the satisfaction of the township's manager of operations. Certainly to the end of that condition, it could be, a clause could be added to say that the condominium, I think / development agreement shall include a clause to notify purchasers of the former or existing sewage system on the property. Something to that regard within that condition to tie it to that removal of that sub-sewage system.
Yeah.
And then it would have to be registered on title, and that would be there forever.
Yeah, so that one would be good. And also the notification clause of I talked about that before, the 7 nuisance farming practices. So that they can't come, because we've had people come to the township complain about some farming things, but this way they know again, before they even sign up to buy this property, that those things are there, and who's ever in council at the time won't have to bother with it. They can say, hey, it's on your contract, and so, and there was something it was from the NPCA. What's that? No, it had something to do with, I'm on the wrong one. Okay, it had something to do with the vegetation, if they do any removal of any other vegetation. It says they should, but I would recommend that we should say it shall, because should means they don't really have to. It's just before Hydro 1 paragraph. Oh, I'm on the wrong one here. Yeah, 18 of 38.
Oh.
So it's the paragraph just before Hydro 1.
Nest survey should be completed, shall be completed?
Yeah, relating to the NEST survey that
Yeah.
shall be completed?
Yeah.
Or should be?
It says should, but I think it should say the word shall. I don't know if that's this or if it's the MPCA that has to do that, but that's one discrepancy I seen there.
Just looking for that condition. I don't know if there's one.
Okay. So Sarah, do we want to, Alderman Hessel's suggestions, amend these conditions then? Okay. So can he capture both of those items that he stated in one amendment? Or do we have to? Okay. Okay, so can you go back to your first, I think it was
So-
25 you wanted to add? And I think
Yeah, full
David was-
disclosure and notification clause. I think that can kind of almost go as one.
So that's for item number 25.
The septic.
Yeah. Okay, so Meredith got that, so we're just gonna deal with that one then?
Okay, yeah, because the other
Okay.
one might go under the MDS.
Okay, so then we'll get a seconder for that. Seconded by Alderman Gilmore. Any discussion on the amendment? Okay, seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Was that a hand up? No? Yes? Okay, opposed if any? Okay, so that's carried. So now we'll go on to your second amendment.
Okay, I'm not sure where that one is. The MDS one? I'd
So,
want,
through you, Madam Mayor, the MDS condition is number 31, I believe.
what page?
Yep.
So this is requiring that certain, specifically it'll say within agreements of purchase and sale, the lands in the plan of condominium may be exposed to reduced air quality and or odor from nearby agricultural operations that may interfere with some activities of the owner/tenants who occupy these lands.
But if you go with this, the 7 nuisances, there's 7 different ones, and I'm not sure it's light, dust, there's a whole bunch. So if we could use the, it's called the PPA, what was it now? Okay, Farming and Food Production and Protection Act. It is an act that is out there, so if we could include that in that one. Because I think yours is only covering 2 or 3 of them, so.
So we're just looking to Meredith so we're good with that then? So Meredith's just making note of that. So Alderman Hessels, you're moving that. Is there a seconder for that amendment as well? Seconded by Alderman Gilmore. So any discussion on that amendment? Alderman Conk.
Through you, Madam Mayor, this particular amendment that Alderman Hassels is talking about has to do with units 34, 35, and 36 that are within the MDS measurements. And I don't even think that we should be considering those 3 properties to be eliminated or talked about at all. They're within the MDS measurement, so they shouldn't be allowed to be built, for one thing. This is not fair to the rest of the community. What about the hobby farm across the street? She's having the same issue and she can't build because she's too close to the farm across the road from her. So I don't understand why we're even talking about this. They should not be allowed to build 34, 35, and 36 because they are in the radius.
So maybe I can get one of the planners to speak to Alderman Conk's point that she made about the MDS.
Sure, through you, Madam Mayor. So the, let me just search here. The region of Niagara has reviewed the minimum distance separation calculation for these properties and noted that the 3 units, 34 to 36, were within the MDS arc. And it's due to the horse barn to the northeast of the property. Now, with respect to the exemption that was requested, the region indicated that they're of the opinion that the MDS intent, so the intent of providing that minimum distance separation, can be adequately addressed through the zoning bylaw amendment, provided that appropriate warning clause is included within the condominium agreement. So that is what is being achieved. So it's the regional planner's intent or opinion that the intent of MDS can be achieved as long as the purchasers are warned that these 3 units specifically. The other units are not subject to MDS requirements because they're further away. That's why it only applies to those 3.
Okay, further questions?
Well, isn't that nice that the region has decided that we should allow somebody to build that's in the radius? What about all of the rest of the residents of Wainfleet who are going to have the same problem further down the road? They're going to point to these 3 units and say, well, they were allowed to build, how come we're not? So I think we're opening up a can of worms. I don't care if the region, if the upper tier says it's okay with them. I think we need some legal advice on this one.
Okay, so Alderman Hessels, did you wish to comment further?
Okay, I kind of want to revise that. I don't want all 3. I want that whole condominium act to have this notification clause on there. Not just the 3 that are the MDS. I think there's a process for the MDS they have to go. I don't know if they've went through that process or not, but I believe they have to put the yellow sign up that they're doing. And so if it doesn't pass, those 3 might not get it. That's what I think Alderman Conk is after. But there is a process I believe they have to go through. But my notification clause, I would like it to be in the Condominium Act for everybody out there so that nobody's going to come and complain, because odor does travel. Although the wind comes from the southwest, I don't think it'll be an issue, but just just so we don't have to bother with it later.
Okay, so I'm just looking at the clerk. She's captured that then in the amendment. Okay, so any further questions or comments on the amendment? Alderman Conk?
Through you, Madam Mayor, so can we be clear about what it is that we're talking about here with regards to number 31?
Okay, my thing is to put that notification clause, the 7 farming or nuisance practices or whatever, that they be put onto the whole condo development, that it's included in their contract when they sign up.
So under 31, it talks about units 34 to 36. You want that eliminated and all of the units that are in instead?
I just, yeah, the whole condominium act.
Okay, so we have that clarity. Okay, any further questions or discussion on the amendment? And no more comments from staff, so then I will call the question. All those in favor of the amendment? And that's carried. Okay, so Alderman Hessels, any more?
I'm going to give somebody else a
shall,
chance.
sorry, we want to,
Okay,
page
did I get that
18.
one? Okay.
No, and the clerk, I was hoping she would be okay with the friendly amendment, but she is not. So you have to make an amendment then to change should to shall on
Yes.
page 18 in
Yeah.
that paragraph
Yeah.
that there. So clerk, do you need a minute to find that? Yeah, it's actually back.
It's just above the hydro one. Is there? Yeah, that's my problem, okay.
Okay, so I need a seconder for,
Okay.
David, you want to
Yeah,
comment?
through you, Madam Mayor, might I suggest that, so this paragraph has not been included specifically as a condition of draft approval. However, perhaps if it's the intent that the word be changed to shall, that this condition be an additional, or this be included as an additional condition.
Okay, and there are 2 shoulds in that paragraph, and I think they both should say shall.
So we'll make, so Alderman Hessels, you're moving then that we make this an additional condition and we change the 2 shoulds to 2 shalls.
Yeah.
Say that really fast.
Should shall?
Okay, so a seconder for that amendment, Alderman Gilmore. Any discussions then on adding this and changing the wording a bit? Okay, seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor, and that's carried. So Alderman Hessels, does that complete it your?
I think so.
Okay. Further questions or comments on the report? Alderman Dykstra.
Through you, Madam Mayor. David, I'm not sure you want to answer the question. During your presentation, you mentioned that if council approves the draft plan of condominium, the H holding pattern would remain in effect. Could you explain how that would get lifted by meeting the conditions set out in the plan of condominium or in the staff report? So could you explain whether it's staff, council, agencies, who would lift that H holding clause?
Through you, Madam Mayor. So the application to remove the H would have to go through a separate zoning amendment to remove the H specifically. The township has a process for that. It's similar to a regular zoning bylaw amendment. I believe it's slightly reduced fee for the removal of a holding symbol. But this can only be done once the conditions of the hold have been met. So the applicant would have to come back and apply to township council or apply to the municipality. The amendment would be decided by township council to remove the H.
Okay, further questions or comments? Alderman Conk.
Through you, Madam Mayor, I do have a lengthy number of questions, as you can tell by my stickies. And I've also got some comments to make with regards to this development. This is the first of its kind in Wainfleet. I think we all are in agreement on that one. And I'm wondering at this point, had this not already been in the new official plan, would we be looking at a different planning report?
Through your worship to Alderman Conk, this application was submitted on rural lands prior to the province releasing the growth plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe in 2006. So this application was transitioned. There was transitional provisions provided by the province for those applications that were submitted prior to it. That is why this application was submitted, considered, and approved by the Ontario Municipal Board for what ended up being 41 lots. Under the growth plan that came in 2006, under rural designated lands outside of settlement areas, no more than 3 new lots could be approved on any one property. So if another similar landowner came before council today and asked for an official plan amendment for more than 3 lots, it would not be permitted. This got permitted through the transition provisions of the growth plan. But it is in effect, and the 41 lots are now part of your official plan.
Thank you for that. So, for want of a better phrase, we're stuck with it.
It is in your official plan, and because of that, the principle of development has been established. So it's not a question of whether 41 lots or 41 units are appropriate on this property. That is in your official plan. And whatever, if this application is appealed by anyone, the Ontario Municipal Board will consider that principal development in making their decision. So the question for council, and what council needs to make the decision tonight, is what is appropriate form of development to implement that permission official plan. Form of development both in your zoning provisions and your zoning restrictions, and form of development in terms of the blocks that are shown. Is that the appropriate form of development that you want to implement those 41 lots?
Okay. So, having said all of that, I honestly believe that this whole file, if you will, has been mismanaged right from day one. And one of the things that concerns me is those 14 reports that have been done by the developer because he had to. And however, none of those reports ever got to council. So we're at a loss with regards to information. I have them. I've read 9 of the 14, and they're all roses and sunshine, just the way consultants make reports out to be. However, I feel that those 14, well, there's not 3 of them have already been peer reviewed. I think the other 11 need to be peer reviewed, and they need to be brought back to council with some commenting by our staff and some more legal advice. We don't have any legal advice with regards to this development. I've asked for legal advice twice before, and I'm going to ask for it again. We don't have enough legal advice, and we don't have enough information to be even considering what you're asking here this evening. We just don't. Under all of those reports, those 14 reports, they all say, to the satisfaction of the township and whatever agency that report happened to deal with. Again, those reports didn't come to council, and the last I heard, council is the final authority on planning. So how is that possible that those reports got looked at by staff and nobody said anything to council? So that's a huge problem, I think, with this. We've had this report for less than a week. You people have been working on this for a long time. We've had this report for a week, and you're asking us to make a decision this evening that we can't make. I don't believe we can make this decision this evening with the information that we have at hand. It's just not possible. I think because this is the first development of this kind in Wainfleet, we need to be careful about what it is that we're doing. And yes, I get that it's in the official plan, and that was a decision made by some guy from Toronto that doesn't know Wainfleet from a hole in the ground. So here we are. And the three reports that were peer-reviewed, I read those reports, and he had a fair amount to say about those reports, and wasn't really happy with them. So again, I think we, this council, need to request that the rest of those reports be peer-reviewed and brought back to us. And then ask us, without all that information and the other information that I think that we're missing, then you should ask us for approval of the plan of condominium and not before. So I do have some other questions and comments, if I can continue, Madam Mayor. On page 60, under policy 3.3.12 II, it states, and you quoted it here, the Township of Wainfleet shall be responsible for full cost recovery for communal water and sewer services. End of quote. And then whoever wrote this report goes on to say, this means that the township shall ensure that any costs incurred by the township to provide communal water and sewer services, if any, shall be recovered. We're not in the business of providing communal services, so I don't understand why this II is even in there. I think we need to clarify that the township will not ever be providing communal services to any development. And it's open to interpretation. So yes, you put in here that that's what that quote means, but somebody else who's looking at that 3.3.12 II and not understanding the background for this could interpret it that the township's going to put in a communal service and bill somebody else later. That needs to be fixed.
The policy 3312 sub 2 is a policy in your official plan. If council wants to amend their official plan, it's a process you'll have to go through to amend it. The requirement of the municipal responsibility agreement that is in the conditions that it has to be entered in with the region requires that the region step in. So that takes all the responsibilities for the township off the township, and it's a responsibility for the region to step in if anything goes problematic with a communal waste treatment system, and that's the reason for that condition to be added. You want to add anything?
And just to add to that further, 33312 is directly it's specific to these lands, so it wouldn't apply. This policy would not apply to any other lands within Wainfleet. To answer your question about other lands that might be affected by this policy, whereas this is a site-specific exception in the official plan applying only to this property.
Okay, so, but again, if somebody doesn't know the background and they're looking at this and they could take a look at it, they're going to misinterpret this. So I think it needs to be fixed, and I'm willing to make the motion that we go through the motions to fix this in the official plan.
Okay, so that would, the clerk's saying that would be a separate discussion, so if we stay germane to the report, and then maybe that'd be a notice of motion, Betty, at the, okay.
Okay. So I have here in my notes that I was going to ask for the difference between the plan of condominium and subdivision, but that's already been covered by Cheryl. So thank you very much for that, because I'm sure there are people in the audience who didn't know the difference and are wondering why we're even doing this. So moving on, page 61. Can you tell us what the exact size size that these condos are going to be on. 400 meters is, so on page 61, you've given us a minimum lot frontage. That's the whole lot frontage of the entire property. What is going to be the exact size of these slivers of land?
Through you, Madam Mayor. So on the proposed draft plan of subdivision, or draft plan of condominium, pardon me, there's dimensions on each of the lots. The ones along the lakeshore frontage, the ones along the lakeshore frontage are 15.24 meters wide, and they are fairly deep, I believe. They're about 77 meters, and then the ones on the north side of the private road are slightly wider, at 16.3 meters. And in depth, 40 meters in depth. And so the minimum lot width, which would be the lot frontage, would be a minimum regulation in the zoning bylaw.
Well, I do understand that for a plan of condominium to work, you have to have a whole bunch of homes on really tiny pieces of land. And I understand, I get it. However, it seems like we're bending over backwards here to give a developer something that nobody else can do. Now, I'm sorry, that's just not fair. And I get it, but those people out there, they don't understand this. They don't understand why this developer is going to be allowed to have a minimum side yard setback of 6 feet when everybody else has to have 18. Like, so, and I don't expect you to respond to that. It's just I don't get it, and I don't think we should be even contemplating doing any of those revisions to accommodate this. I really don't.
If I just respond on one aspect, Madam Mayor, through you to Councillor Conk. When we reviewed that, the maximum number of units was set, and there's two ways to look at this development. One is to lot out the entirety of the development other than the areas that's required to be reserved for the sewage treatment plant, which would have a lot larger lots, still 41 lots. But then you wouldn't have the large open space blocks that are provided north of the road up to Lakeshore Road. The alternative is to do what this development has done, was basically put all those lots into smaller land area and provide much more open space on the block, open space between these lots along Lakeshore up to along the Lake Erie shoreline up to Lakeshore Road. We saw that as a positive of putting the lots into a smaller area and providing more open space to the north.
Okay, so on page 63, the 30% and the 45% were talked about earlier. Just, I need some clarity here. Is that for the whole property or each unit?
That would be for each unit.
So each little sliver of land is going to be covered facing the lake by 30% with house, garage, septic system, and the ones that don't face the lake are going to have 45% lot coverage. Yes?
Through your worship, yes, with one correction, no septic system. The septic system is all up in block 50. So on those blocks, compared to any other lots along Lakeshore, it's just the house and garage that's on that property, not the septic system.
So there's no settling tank on each
No, it's all in Block 50, which is the block north at Lakeshore Road.
So has that changed from the wastewater servicing report? Because I was under the impression that each lot would have a settling tank.
No.
And then the wastewater would be pumped to the treatment plant.
All the treatment is done in the treatment plant, which all then has beds. So all of it's taken through to that treatment plant.
Well, I'm pretty sure that that's what was discussed at the open meeting in March, is that was the system that was chosen.
Yeah, if you can just come to the podium so the live stream can pick it up.
Sorry, I'm Josh Maitland with Greenland Consulting Engineers. Just further to your point there was an option considered in the class environmental assessment which looked at a low slope gravity system with tankage on each property, but that option was eliminated from consideration through the EA process, and we ended up going with the communal system. The gravity collection system that pumps from a single location up to the plant, and then it's treated all in one spot. Thanks.
Page 64, there's that darn MDS stuff all over again. MDS is the minimum distance separation is there for a reason. And the planning report from the consultant clearly shows 34, 35, and 36 unit within that arc. And I would also like to know if minimum distance separation was done from the hobby farm across the road. Was that exercise done?
Through you, Madam Mayor, just looking at the consultant report, which has the detail of the MDS calculation, which is from the hobby horse farm located at 11629 Lakeshore Road.
But that's not the hobby farm that's across the road. The one that this is taken from is to the east of this property on the same side of the road.
Right.
So it's and the minimum distance separation is 243 meters.
Correct.
But did we take any distance measures from the hobby farm across the road that has 2 horses in a barn?
2 horses in a barn would require. Maybe we can ask the applicant to.
Yeah. Perhaps we could have the applicant clarify whether that was taken from that property. We only see from that one hobby farm on the south side of Lakeshore Road.
So we'll have Cheryl's come up and comment on that. Cheryl, sorry, it's... Yep, there we go.
Sorry. So the MDS measurement was taken from the adjacent farm. The hobby farm was farther away, so it didn't actually warrant doing an MDS calculation because there is quite a large distance between those proposed residential units and the farm across the road. The depth of our property is quite significant. And in addition to that, through the MDS policies, you are allowed to ask for an exemption through a zoning bylaw amendment to the MDS requirements. And so that's why it's been included in this zoning bylaw amendment. And that's why the region reviewed it and commented that they weren't concerned, again, because that radius comes just it just touches into those 3 units. The other alternative was to move those 3 units closer to the adjacent or further west, but that would have put units even closer to the Botts property. And so we, on balance, decided that we would propose this layout.
Well, thank you for that explanation. However, the map that's in your own report clearly shows those 3 units are not, they're inside, they're definitely inside that arc, and I believe that we're going to have problems if we allow that exemption further down the road from other residents in the township. And I believe we need some legal advice before we agree to this at all, those 3. So do I need to make a motion for that?
Sorry, I think Alderman Hassels wanted to speak to it, but you want to make a motion regarding the...
I think we need some legal advice with regards to these 3 units and the exemption that they're asking for. We could find ourselves in some hot water down the road.
Okay, so, Sarah wants to speak to that.
So through you, Madam Mayor, to Alderman Conk, we did receive legal opinion from the township solicitor. So both Mr. Cross and I spoke with the township solicitor and provided him a copy of the report for him to review. And while he doesn't recommend that we discuss legal advice in an open session, based on the discussion with the solicitor, township staff were confident in proceeding with presenting this report to council tonight. If you wanted to get into the specifics of that legal discussion, that would be a closed session matter. I think it's 13F, subject to solicitor-client privilege, because open session, it could be construed that you're waiving that right. But we did obtain the legal opinion, and based on that conversation, we felt comfortable proceeding with presenting this report to council.
So I still think we need legal advice. I think we need to hear it, and we need to be able to ask questions.
So you're saying you want to go into closed session now and hear what was the report back from staff regarding the legal advice, or you want to, at a separate meeting, call the lawyer in? Okay, so then, yeah, you'd have to ultimately defer the report, and then I would think after that, make a motion, or defer the report based on legal advice at the next council meeting, I guess. Does that sound right to you?
Well, that's what we have to do.
Okay, so you're making a motion then? Well, yeah, once we're okay, so we've got the report on the floor as amended, and now Alderman Conk is making a deferral motion pending legal advice at the next council meeting, so we need a seconder for that. Alderman Dykstra. Okay, so there's no discussion on a deferral motion, and I'm actually going to ask for a recorded vote on that. So whenever the clerk is ready, we'll run through a recorded vote on the deferral.
Alderman Dykstra.
In favor.
Alderman Hassel.
Opposed?
Alderman Conk. In favor. Alderman Gilmore.
Opposed.
Mayor Dress.
Opposed. Okay, so we're back to the balance of the report, and Alderman Hassels, you wanted to speak to what Alderman Conk was talking about with the MDS?
Yeah, I guess with that MDS, it might be too close, but I believe it's an animal unit thing. That is why this was, and it's happened more often in Wainfleet that the MDS is modified or whatever. It's got something to do with animal units. But what I would like to see is that if there was potential for that farm next door to expand, that he's not held back by an MDS. Like, I wouldn't want it, if these lots are that close and he wants to expand his building, he's going to be subject to an MDS, which where I would see a problem, but I don't know if there's a way that we could eliminate that.
I'm going to look to the planning staff.
Just to, so the MDS calculation is based on the amount of horses that can be accommodated in a barn rather than the existing amount of horses. According to the report, there are 3 horses that are currently stabled on the property, but the barn could be, is large enough to accommodate 23 horses. And that is what's generating the 243 meter based on 23 horses. So the owner of the current barn could, if there are 3 horses, could have 20 additional horses without affecting the MDS arc.
Yeah, and that's fine, but if he wanted to go beyond that, he would need an MDS, correct?
Correct.
So I don't want him to lose his opportunity for that because of this. I don't know if you understand that part of it. I don't know if that could be an amendment made to it, or...
There could be a provision within this zoning bylaw amendment to address that as well, of a potential expansion of that specific barn. So that the owner of that barn wouldn't be, MDS wouldn't apply to that owner.
So and that would fall under what we're doing tonight? This would be the opportunity then for Alderman Hessels to make that amendment?
Through your worship, yes, that is correct. Now, what you would do is exempt MDS as it applies to this development for that owner, recognizing there's a series of houses further to the east that owner would also have to apply to on any MDS for any future expansion, which will likely not allow expansion beyond 23 horses in any event. But if council is concerned about that, we could put it in the zoning bylaw that any future expansion of that farm, these houses wouldn't count in towards the MDS, if that's your desire.
If I may continue, actually, I'm not sure the hobby farm across the road, but I'd like to have that they'd have the same privilege. So any farm that is located within, what is it, 300 meters, is it? That is your max. So.
Through your worship, Councillor Hessels, Alderman Hessels, it depends on the size of the barn. So it's not just the 300 meters.
No, but that's where I wouldn't want them to lose their potential.
Right.
Like, I know what their size might be now, it might be small, but I wouldn't want them to lose their potential to increase because they'll have an MDS with the development.
So this amendment that Alderman Hessels is talking about is specific to the development. So you're saying the houses on Bellevue Beach Road and Beach Road West, Beach Road West, they would still, the property owner would still have to do everything they had to do to satisfy those property owners for the MDS, and the same with the property owner across the street, same with the people in behind them, people to the side, was just specific to this property. Okay.
That's correct, Your Worship. And we could add a zoning provision that says that expansions of adjacent agricultural operations would not be, their MDS would not be limited by these lots, if that's what you desire. We could create a provision to add to the bylaw in that effect.
Okay. So is there a seconder then for Alderman Hessel's amendment? Seconded by Alderman Conk. Okay, any discussion then on the amendments or further questions or clarity? Okay, seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? And that's carried. Okay, further, Alderman Conk.
Okay, on page 65, in your report, you say that you're not sure what Block 42 is going to be used for because it's being kept back by the owner. Do we have any further information on that?
Through you, Your Worship. So essentially, when we were reviewing the application, we were concerned that if it was kept in private ownership, it could be held for privately rather than as part of the condominium corporation. So the first condition of draft approval that you see, which is condition number 1, and I'll read it out loud. It says that prior to final approval of the draft plan of condominium, the owner shall submit a revised draft plan of condominium to the satisfaction of the township staff, changing Unit 42 to Block 42 and identifying it as a common element block. And this would be a way to ensure that the common element block would be held similar to how Block 50 and 49 are held for open space purposes. It would be zoned as open space, and it would not permit development now or in the future.
Can you also kind of clue us in about 17 and 18 are highlighted? What are they for?
Oh, I think it's 47 and 48. It does look like 17 and 18 on that. So those are open space blocks for stormwater management purposes, I believe. So they would also be included within the open space zoning as opposed to the residential lakeshore zoning.
On page 66, under 1.1.4.1, under applicable planning policies and the planning analysis, 1.1.4.1 talks about building upon rural character. And I'm just wondering how this particular development, from your perspective, develops the rural character of Wainfleet, when this is it's a very planned, if you will, development, whereas everything around it has not been planned. I mean, we didn't have any good planning along the lakeshore for many, many years until the last council said we need to fix this. So this is deliberate. So I'm kind of not connecting the dots here on how a deliberate development, smack dab in the middle of something that's kind of ragtag, is developing that character.
Through your worship to Councillor Conk. So when the provincial policy statement is referring to rural areas, it's areas that are outside of settlement areas. Settlement areas in Wainfleet refer to the hamlets. Closest one to here would be Burnaby. Other hamlets, Austrian Corners, Wainfleet, etc. And part of the rural character in this area, as identified in the official plan as lakeshore residential, is a mix of rural as well as residential uses. So yes, rural by definition is agricultural uses, but in this case, rural can also include residential development. This is, in our opinion, and Paul referred to this earlier, is the balance between what the existing development along the lakeshore is, as well as preserving that open space character by concentrating the development along the lake and maximizing the size of the open space blocks to have that open space feeling still that you do experience in Wainfleet and along the lakeshore. And so considering that the official plan does permit 41 units, and in that context of these policies, we do think that it's consistent.
I respectfully disagree. But anyway, under the same section, number H, it talks about conserving biodiversity and considering the ecological benefits provided by nature. I'm sorry, the biodiversity is the toad and the vernal pool that the toads do their thing in. That's disappeared. The boundaries have been narrowed down from 2007 to what it is today. And nobody seems to know how the M&R arrived at that. So how is this development conserving the biodiversity of the area along that lakeshore? I'm not understanding that at all.
So through you, Madam Mayor, the Ministry of Natural Resources are the ones that delineated the boundary of the Fowler's toad habitat. So and that is the line that we do see on the draft plan of subdivision. So it is preserving that habitat. The line was drawn not just using an air photo; it was actually done on site, and that's how the boundary was determined.
Just to add that, Your Worship, through Alderman Conk, because this is an endangered species, the Fowler's toad, the only agency that can make a decision about development in their habitat is MNR. They are the sole responsibility. And that takes away from council's authority, because it is solely the minister that makes decision of development in endangered species habitat. They're the ones that identify the habitat boundary. They're the ones that issue a permit. They've issued the permit, they've identified the habitat, and that's why we've zoned it as such.
Well, I do understand that. However, if you speak with all of the residents in that area, there's no more toads. Since they did away with most of the trees and the brush along the Fowler toad area, there's no more toads. They don't sing, they don't do what they do. It's quiet. So, just saying. On page 67, under 1.1.5.2, number C, limited residential development. Can somebody give me a definition of limited residential development? We don't seem to have that in our official plan.
Through Your Worship, to Alderman Conk, the limited is established by your fish plan already, and that is the 41 lots that have been approved. The question of how many lots in this property is not a question of the applications before you. That's already been established. So that limited has already been established through previous decisions.
Okay. Page 68, we just talked about the Fowler's toad, so I don't think we need to go there. Page 71. So you're probably not going to be happy with me asking about the density policies either. I couldn't find a density policy anywhere. Where is it? Am I misinterpreting what this means, density policy? Oh, I'm sorry, it was page 71.
Through Your Worship, to Alderman Conk, the density policy, if I recall, are the minimum size requirements in the lakeshore area for individual lots. But in this case, that is because you have a site-specific permission on this property. The density provision is governed by the 41 lots. That's what governs the density. So there's no more lots that could be permitted other than 41 lots based on your site-specific permission, and that governs your density.
Okay.
And it's through a condominium corporation, so your site-specific provision says it's through a condominium, so that's how the form of development is achieved.
I'm not sure, I'm not sure on what page I'm at, but anyway, 2.5 and 2.6. You talk about in the official plan that this particular development, you're clear that it meets all of the requirements, I guess, of 2.5 and 2.6. Again, this has got to be interpretation, planning interpretation. I looked at all of 2.5 and 2.6. I read it I don't know how many times, and I just don't agree. This development does not meet any of what's listed in 2.5, 2.6 under the goals, under any of it. I just, and again, I'm not asking that you respond to that. It's a statement. I don't agree with it. And again, we don't have enough information to be even contemplating the approval of this particular request this evening, simply because we don't have enough information. And I'm just repeating myself at this point, so I'll move on. 75. The road use agreement. Again, I'm going to say we need some legal advice here. What's that road use agreement going to look like?
Through Madam Mayor to Alderman Conk. So should this development be approved, the draft condition is a road use agreement. So when it comes time for the applicant to clear that condition, they would work with the township in drafting that development, or that agreement, which would have to come back before council. So any agreements that the township enters into requires a bylaw to authorize the mayor and clerk to execute those agreements. So council would be involved in approving the agreement. So staff would be involved with the township solicitor in developing the agreement, and it would be presented to council as a bylaw for approval.
So when we're talking about the road use agreement, we're talking about the water line that's coming down from Augustine Road, correct? And the need for that water line to be in our road allowances. And I would like to know, Mr. Nan, perhaps you can answer this question. Has the developer been in to speak with you about this at all?
Through your worship to Alderman Conk, no. The arrangement with the private water line would be with the private water company. We just made a stipulation included in this to protect the township that they will have to approach us with a road use agreement if they encroach on any of our road allowances. So if that water line is going to be utilized, they would have to approach us, and we would get a road use agreement with our legal staff implemented at that time, which is a total separate agreement, again, from this condo agreement.
So can you give me a little bit more information? You and I have had this conversation before, but perhaps the room needs to know it. With regards to this particular water line, how deep is that line going to be required to be put in the road lines?
Through your worship to Alderman Conk, the new water line that will be installed will have to meet the new specific water line standards set out by the ministry.
Okay, and that is?
Depending on the size of the pipe, it would have to be a minimum below frost level, and it'll be installed approximately, based on the design, it'll be about 5 feet.
Okay, so I'm just going to throw something out here. What if the developer decides that it's going to be too expensive to run that water line down the road due to the fact that there's rock close to the surface? We know that from the water and sewer fight. What's plan B for delivery of water?
Through your worship, the environmental assessment that was signed off on by the Ministry of Environment and Climate Change was based on the preferred water solution. So if that changed, then it would have to be amended through the environmental assessment process.
But amended to what?
To another solution that would be acceptable.
Well, again, I'm going to bang the drum. We don't have enough information. We don't know what we're getting into here. And I don't know if even finishing off the rest of my questions is going to get us anywhere, because we do not have enough information, and I'm going to be asking for a deferral until we get more information. And I would like to see, before council moves anywhere close to making an approval, that we'd have some detailed design put in front of us. We need to know exactly what we're approving. We don't know any of that.
So Alderman Conk, that's it for your questions then?
Well, I mean, I've got lots of other questions and comments. I mean, I'm not happy with the way the comments were dealt with in the report. They missed some of the questions. I went back in my own notes, and it wasn't a question was asked: how many comments were received that didn't approve of and how many comments were received that did approve of. That wasn't in the report. It's just a thumbnail sketch of the answers that there. So again, not enough information.
Okay, any further questions or comments then on the report that we have before us? Alderman Hassels?
I guess just the side yard setbacks, it's 1.6 meters, so these houses can be like, I guess maybe 10 feet or 3 meters apart. I'm just wondering if there's something in place that stays clear, because like I'm thinking fire again. If we had to get around back, or even fire separation, and maybe that comes in another report, what the houses will have to be side by side, because like we did have on the lake there that one year at New Year's Eve, one house went to the next house, it just kept burning. So I guess the fire separation, I wonder how that would be, and if there's a clause in there that space stays open and clear, that they don't fence it off or something.
I'm not sure who wants to speak to that, or if we look to the, David? Okay.
Yeah, I just wanted to address the setback. So the minimum 1.5 meter setback is a setback that is already established in the residential lakeshore zone. So that is the minimum setback. Although as part of the site-specific regulation here pertaining to this development, across all of Wainfleet, any home in the residential lakeshore zone needs to have a minimum 1.5 meter setback. So it's consistent with that. Perhaps the fire chief might want to add to this, but I just wanted to bring up again the note that there is a drought plan condition that requires, regarding your question about fire, that requires the homes to be fitted with sprinkler systems for fire attenuation.
Chief, did you wish to comment?
I'm not exactly sure how best to address that Alderman Hessel's question in terms of spacing, but certainly spacing is a matter that, from a fire protection perspective, is a concern. But this certainly, the spacing that is being proposed, I wouldn't say would be uncommon in various areas. I think the addition of the sprinkler systems would provide added fire protection in each one of those properties.
Okay, further questions or comments then on the report as amended? Alderman Conk.
Through you, Madam Mayor, I'm just curious. In my last comments, I indicated many times that we don't have enough information. Are we going to talk about I would like to see a deferral, but short of
But
that.
Alderman Conk, we already defeated a deferral, so
For the whole thing, not a deferral for legal advice.
I thought, no, the deferral that we were under the impression was defeating or deferring the whole thing to get legal advice and bring it back at the next council meeting.
Okay, so then we need to talk about the conditions, because there's all sorts of conditions in here that need to be either added to or taken away from.
Okay, so you have suggestions for conditions much like Alderman Hassels did? Okay.
Number 10.
Well, actually, Alderman Conk, I'm going to suggest a short recess then, real quick, okay, so if we can just have a quick recess, and then we'll get back, a motion just for recess, moved by Alderman Hassel, seconded by Alderman Gilmore, all those in favor, and we'll just make that quick, that's carried. and we'll get ready to resume the meeting. Okay, so we're going to call the meeting back to order. We've got our council members and staff back up here. So I will go back to Alderman Conk then to carry on.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Mayor. Number 10, this is asking for the approval for a 3-year period and then an extension. To be honest with you, I'm not in favor of that, and I think number 11 should have some added wording to that, to be removed from the official plan should, if that final approval is not given to this draft plan within 3 years of the approval date and no extensions have been granted, approval will lapse under Section 5132 of the Planning Act, and I think we should put in there to be removed from the official plan.
Okay, yeah, Paul.
Through your worship, these are conditions to a plan of condominium. You can't put in a condition to a plan of condominium that changes your official plan. You would have to do a separate official plan amendment and a separate process. You can't embed that into a plan of condominium.
So what is the process so it would be the next council that would have to deal with that should the 3 years lapse and no extension be applied for?
Through your worship, to Alderman Conk, that's correct. If there's no extension given by council at that time, if there is a request made and there's no extension made, then council would have to submit an official plan amendment with a public meeting and vote on that. So that would have to go through a regular official plan amendment process.
Well, let's hope they're bright enough to do that. I'm also wondering if we can add to under 12 a letter of credit with I don't know what the dollar amount would be for future unforeseen expenses directly related to costs that could arise from challenges to something that may happen at Lakewood. Plus, I think that there's probably, looking down the road, we're going to have staff who are going to be responding to phone calls from Lakewood. I can see down the road there's going to be things that are going to happen, and they're not going to know who to call, so they're going to call the township. So I'm just wondering if that's at all possible to be added as a condition.
So I'll look to planning staff again to comment after they confer.
Through your worship, to Alderman Conk. So clearance letters are required where, for instance, you have a landscaping requirement or road to be constructed, or the sewage treatment plant requirement. You'll then take a letter of credit so that if they don't build it and the township has to build it, the township can draw on that letter of credit. But it's a letter of credit under this aspect is not something that pays for additional staff resources. It is to draw on if that work is not done. So something like you want the developer to pay for staff resources would have to be separately addressed in the subdivision agreement. I've never seen it done, not meaning it can't be done, but it would have to be a separate condition in the draft plan in the subdivision, in the condominium agreement.
So we could get some legal advice on that, yes?
I'm seeing nodding yes, so I don't know if Sarah wants to comment.
Through Madam Mayor to Alderman Conk, so much like the road use agreement, the condominium agreement or development agreement, again, our township solicitor would be involved in either drafting and or reviewing that, and that would be presented to council for approval. So at that time, we can have a look at that.
Okay. Just looking at my notes here. On page 9142, it talks about block 51. Where's block 51?
Through you, Madam Mayor, to Councillor Conk, Block 51 is actually the block of the road, the private road allowance. So it extends down from Lakeshore Road. It's the yellow.
Okay. And is there, I know there isn't because I've read this, this development is going to impact the Botts lot. Should we have something in there where they are consulted with regards to perhaps more trees or fencing if they want it, a berm that could be put in place? Is there anything in there that we can add as a condition to consult with the Botts with regards to separation of property, I guess?
You want me to answer it?
Yeah.
Through your worship, to Alderman Conk.
Number 7.
So condition 7, we're looking for the condition. We know there's condition 7. Sorry. That condition 7, that prior to final approval, the owner agrees to implement the proposed landscape and streetscape features in accordance with the submitted tree preservation and landscape plans. On those, they do show maintaining the trees to the rear of the bought property. So if council so desires, we could expand that condition as say and have further consultations with the Botts in terms of finalizing that tree preservation landscape plans, which is where you address things like fencing and additional trees.
So that'd be an amendment. So that's an amendment you would wish to make at this moment. What that was for, sorry, Betty. Number 7? Okay, condition 7. Okay, so seconder for that, Alderman Hessels. Any discussion on that amendment? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor, and that's carried.
I think that's it for me.
Okay, so any further questions or comments then on the report? Okay, seeing none, then I will call the question and I think it's a good idea to call for a recorded vote.
Alderman Dykstra?
Opposed.
Alderman Hessels?
In favor.
Alderman Conk? Opposed. Alderman Gilmore?
In favor.
In favor. Okay, so now we will move on to, so now we'll move on to planning application for rezoning. So I'll look to the clerk to read that. Okay, so I need a mover and a seconder for that report. Moved by Alderman Hessels and seconded by somebody, Alderman Conk. Any discussion or questions on that report? Okay, seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? And that's carried. Okay, and now we are into correspondence, and we don't need to read the whole thing. We can just go straight into it. So we've got a couple that we need to address. So we have 162 from the city of Niagara Falls, and I think, sure. So maybe we'll give it a second. I see some people. Okay, so we have 162, so City of Niagara Falls regarding the OLG Modernization Framework Resolution, and that's what they've been opposed to. They've had some protests and everything, so I don't know if anybody wants to make a motion to support that or to receive for information. I would suggest supporting that. Okay, okay, receiving, whichever. So I'm looking to somebody to make a motion to amend this correspondence to do something. We can just receive it. Okay, Alderman Conk? All right, so we're receiving it for information. I need a seconder. Alderman Gilmore, all those in favor? And that's carried. Okay, and then now we're going on to 164 from the city of Port Colborne. So I don't know if, Alderman Conk?
Through you, Madam Mayor, I am going to make a motion that we support this particular resolution.
Okay, so a seconder for that, Alderman Gilmore. Any questions or discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor, and that's carried. All right, and now we're moving on to 168. So this was regarding intermunicipal transit. And I think they were looking for direction regarding a staff member to sit on that committee. Am I correct? Okay, so, and I know that there had been discussion because he's got so much time on his hands, Richard Nan being on that committee. So I don't know if council wishes to make a motion to appoint Mr. Nan in his free time to be on that committee. Okay, Alderman Hessels and a seconder for that motion. Alderman Conk, all those in favor? And that is carried. Yeah. And then we had a request regarding sponsorship for an event. And I know we get asked for a lot. There is a silent auction item option, and Amber puts together a mean gift basket. So it's up to council. We can. It was a request from some business within the township that's supporting this event. So, or we can just receive it. Alderman Dykstra, that's your name? Support? Silent auction item? Yeah. So it's $100 minimum, but we can come up with that. We've stockpiled some stuff. So a seconder for that, Alderman Gilmore. All those in favor? That's carried. And then 171. I don't know if we just want to receive that for information or. So, okay, Alderman Conk's making the motion to receive for information. Seconder for that, maybe Alderman Gilmore. All those in favor, that is carried. And then, was there anything else? Alderman Dykstra.
Through you, Madam Mayor, item number 163, I know we saw a staff report on this in the past. I just see that it's come to light again. I'm just wondering if it's a request from the Historical Society and changing the term from alderman to councillor. I don't know how to really address this as it's already come to council and we did defeat it, correct?
I think it would have to be, there's two things. It would have to be a reconsideration, and then it would also, it was mentioned that we're later in the term, so we'd have to be changing the name plaques and stuff, so.
So with that, I would suggest, I mean, do we have to respond to this or just receive it as, just receive it?
Yeah, that's how, that was the recommendation, was to receive it for information.
That would be a good idea. Let
Okay.
this council decide.
Sure.
Or
Okay.
We're kind of late into it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, any other? No, it's just, we're just leaving it as is, right? That's what you're, okay. Alderman Hessels.
Well, could we send them a letter stating what we're going to do, that we just address that, and just so they know what's going on instead of...
Yep, Ted, we can do that. Okay. Any other correspondence anybody wishes to address? Okay, seeing none, then we vote on it as amended? No? Okay. So then still not used to that. So now we're going into the bylaws.
Now the following bylaws being now read the first, second, and third time and finally passed this 18th day of July, 2017. Bylaw number 32, 2017, being a bylaw to amend bylaw number 13, 2015, being a bylaw to appoint members of the Fire Master Planning and Community Committee. Bylaw number 33, 2017, being a bylaw to establish a policy for our salvation of the Township of Wainfleet municipality. Bylaw number 34, 2017, being a bylaw to remove the provisions of section 34 of the Planning Act RSO 1990 to amend the bylaw number 34, 2014, incorporation of the Township of Wainfleet with respect to building and forming part of law 2829, concession 5 of the Township of Wainfleet, owned municipally at 53057 Ferry Road. Bylaw number 35, 2017, being a bylaw to authorize the corporation of the Township of Wainfleet to execute a mutual related settlement agreement between the corporation of the Township of Wainfleet and AXT Services Inc. Bylaw number 36, being a bylaw to put new provisions in section 34 and 36 of the Planning Act RSO 1990 to amend bylaw number 34, 2014, the corporation of the Township of Wainfleet as amended, entitled the bylaws to regulate the use of land, its character, location, its usability, its structures thereon, with respect to land known municipally as 1170 White Lake Road as amended to include number 7, notwithstanding section 4.14, the lots are electric stone shall not be used on the population of yes for expanding farm operations.
Okay, that was a mouthful. So I need a mover and a seconder for that. Moved by Alderman Gilmore, seconded by Alderman Hassels. Any discussion on the bylaws? Seeing, Alderman Hassels.
Yeah. I always had a problem with doing 3 readings in one night, and I don't think there's no time restrictions on any of these, so could we just do the first 2 readings tonight and then the third reading the following council?
And so your reasoning is?
It just gives us time. Like I say, I never liked that we did 3 readings in one night, and there's a contentious issue.
So, Meredith's saying all of them were spoken about at previous council meeting, but except for the last one, yeah. So, but is there something in our procedural bylaw that says we just do the third reading now? Did we not? Okay. Okay, so we could just make a motion then to let that one go.
You could always pull one separately, so I'm not sure. She didn't look. Yeah. I wanted to get your attention on it, but, so, I don't know if it's a big deal or not, but it just...
But, yeah, so your reason is to, like, is it to allow people more opportunity to come forward?
Yeah,
and-
I guess, yeah.
Okay, and then, so then if people came forward and you changed your mind on your vote tonight, then we would, so we would just deny the third like, this is where I'm thinking ahead, and I get what you're saying, but we wouldn't approve the third reading, and then we'd have to go back.
How did we do it before then, like when we had these readings,
Well, it was the same way, but then we decided, it was decided to waive it, so, I mean, I guess we can go back to that, I'm just...
I don't know, it kind of, I think, leaves us open and transparent.
Well, I'm looking to Meredith if he wants to make a motion then to have that one, like, how do we, now that we've done this already, I'm just not quite sure procedurally.
So typically that's done before I agree them.
Hmm.
This kind of situation, so what you're asking.
That, okay, then the last one was 36, be read separately. So you don't have to read them over, we'll just do the third, or the last one separately. We could do that, so you don't have to read. Well, that would have to be a whole different thing, so. So just do the last one, 36, I believe it was, separately.
Okay, so, all right, so we're voting on the first four. Okay, I got it. All right, so I will call the question on the first four, so it's a third and final reading. All those in favor? And that's carried. Okay, so now, do you want to just read that?
So do we have to say
Yeah.
that?
Pardon me?
So we're only going to do the 2 readings on 36?
I believe so, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Okay, so Meredith's going to read it again, just so we're clear, and then we'll vote on that separately. Well, I just think Alderman Hassel's is, you want to leave the door open for, you just don't want to confirm it tonight. You want to leave the door open for whatever, so
Well,
that you
yeah,
may
I-
want to change your mind in the next council meeting? Is
You
that?
never know, or maybe
Okay.
they want to change their mind, I don't know, like,
Oh,
it's just.
other council?
It's just,
Okay,
it is a procedure that we've always done before. It wasn't till probably in the last year or so we changed it.
okay, so then we need a motion from you to waive,
The procedure.
or to, not even to waive it, but just to say, let's read this only a first
readings.
and second time tonight. Okay, so you're making that motion, so I need a seconder for that? Seconded by Alderman Dykstra. So I will call the question on that. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? Okay, so that's carried, so we're only going to read it first and second time.
Okay, bylaw number 36, 2017, being a bylaw pursuant to the provisions of section 34 and 36 of the Planning Act, RSO 1990, to amend bylaw number 34, 2014 of the Corporation of the Township of Wainfleet as amended, entitled bylaw to regulate the use of land and character, location, and use of buildings and structures thereon with respect to lands known municipally as 11705 Woodshore Road, as amended with section 7, to include section 7, notwithstanding Section 4.14, the lots on RLS 36 zone shall not be used on the calculations of MDS for expanded farm operations.
Okay, and I'm thinking in consistency, we should have a recorded vote on this, if you don't mind. Sorry, Meredith.
On the staff report. This is, no.
Right. Yeah, can't you have a recorded vote on the reading of the bylaw?
Yeah, we had one on the staff report. Bylaws you do 3 times.
Yep.
To be clear, on the bylaw that you just read,
Mm-hmm.
in favor.
Alderman Hessel. Alderman Cong.
I guess I'm in favor.
Wait, I think, yeah, so do we know what we're voting on? Because we're voting on the Lakewood bylaw. So you just voted in favor?
No, I'm not clear on just exactly.
Okay, so this is the bylaw to confirm the report that we did tonight regarding Lakewood. So I'm going to say if you two voted no, you're voting no on this. Am I right?
Well, how did this even get in this report?
How did we get from third reading to second reading to back to the liquid bylaw? That's where I got lost.
The other one was staff reports.
Yeah.
The other one was a staff report.
The staff, in the staff report, it mentioned the bylaw. We're approving the staff report and then the bylaw for the zoning amendment. Am I right? Okay. So that's the bylaw now. So Ted is saying, I don't want to rush it. Let's go back to reading it tonight and then reading it again a third time. And so you two just voted.
I'm opposed.
Okay. So that's an Alderman Conk?
Again, just to be. Yeah, I get that. However, that isn't what you're after. You're after the way we used to do it before, about having, I think you're talking about having it read a third time at the next council meeting. Yes?
That's, well, we're reading the 2 readings tonight.
Yeah.
And she just read the bylaw,
Yeah,
and you're answering that bylaw.
but isn't what you want a third reading at the subsequent council meeting?
That's true, so, but I guess we didn't vote on that part.
So I'm confused.
Well, Madam Mayor.
Sorry, Terry, we voted to allow Ted to, Ted made the motion that we read it a third time, and we, 3 of you, Terry and I did not support it, you 3 did support it. So now we're reading the actual bylaw, and you just blew us out of the water when you both supported it. So, okay, so are we clear now? Alderman Gilmore, I'm sorry.
No, that's good.
Okay.
That's what I was.
So now we're voting on first and second Lakewood bylaw, which I'm going to hazard a guess that you 2 are opposed to. Okay, so do we want to, you've got that, recorded that? Okay.
In favor.
In favor. Okay. All right, so now we are, I need to put my glasses back on, and we need to move along to notices of motion. Alderman Conk, I think you might have a notice of motion regarding the official plan. So you can simply say I will be bringing a motion to the, okay. Cool. Anybody else have a notice of motion? Okay, seeing none. We don't have any proclamations. Do we have other business? Okay, anybody else have other business before I go to Alderman Conk? All right, Alderman Conk.
I'm just wondering, through you, Madam Mayor, I'm just wondering, we had a special council meeting not too long ago with regards to senior staff, and I'm wondering if we need to have another meeting to, because we decided at that meeting that we would go away and think about things and come back.
Yeah, we're still doing legwork and, so research, so, okay. All right, any other business? Okay. Anybody else with any other business? Anybody in the gallery of it? No, I'm kidding. Okay, so now we'll go to the bylaw to confirm the proceeding of council. Okay, a mover and a seconder, moved by Alderman Gilmore and seconded by Alderman Hessels. All those in favor, that is carried. And now we need a motion to adjourn, moved by Alderman Gilmore, seconded by Alderman Hessels. All those in favor, and that is carried.